Welcome to Fringe Pop 321, the show that believes the world is stranger than we think, but thinking should not be strange. Have you ever heard of the ancient Greek work, The Republic? If you haven't, you've probably heard of its author, Plato. He was a Greek philosopher that lived 428 to 348 BC. Now, Plato and The Republic are sort of like Shakespeare in the Bible. Everyone knows the names, but very few people have ever read the material. It's also like the Bible in that Plato's writings in the Republic and in other pieces have had a lasting effect on Western culture and Western civilization. However, there's something that Plato wrote that isn't really quite like the Bible, but you see the influence of it on TV, in movies, all the time. I'm speaking here of Atlantis. Now, no one makes shows about Plato's Republic. That would be boring. Who wants to watch a show about the defense of philosopher kings? But his brief comments about the continent and the city of Atlantis have sort of spawned a whole fiction industry. The lost city of Atlantis is one of the most enduring mysteries in human history, and its status as history or myth has been debated for a very long time, really even back to Plato's own time. And it's still around today. There are lots of theories. Some would say, well, Atlantis was in the Canary Islands, or it's off the coast of Spain, or maybe it's off Cuba. And some people even would postulate the Antarctic. Like, really? Antarctica? It's true. Some people think that Atlantis is in Antarctica, or was anyway. Now, obviously, all these theories can't be correct, and none of them, in fact, might be correct. This is such a broad subject that we need more than just one episode to cover it. So we're going to be started here on Fringe Pop with episode 1, What in the World is Atlantis? Let's take an overview. The first question we need to ask was there ever really an Atlantis? Well, it all starts with Plato, so we need to see what Plato actually said about it. Now, some of the compositions of Plato are known as dialogues, and they are just what they sound like. They're dialogues between Socrates and a few other people. Socrates, of course, was Plato's mentor. Now, something that Plato wrote in 2 of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, gave birth to the Atlantis legend. Critias is the speaker in both of these dialogues, and he talks about an ancient war between Athens and Atlantis. Here are the highlights. For Critias, Atlantis is, quote, a mighty power which, unprovoked, made an expedition against the whole of Europe and Asia. And elsewhere he adds, this power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, also for Critias, Atlantis was an island situated in front of the straits called the Pillars of Hercules. One of those is the Rock of Gibraltar, south of Spain. And another is the mountain on North Africa, on the coast, on the other side of the entry into the Mediterranean. Now, in the dialogue, Critias added that the island of Atlantis was larger than Libya and Asia put together. And it was also the way to other islands, sort of a stopping point and a big one. And from these you might pass to the whole of the opposite continent which surrounded the true ocean. And those details are a little bit sketchy. What exactly he meant, of course, is part of the mystery. Now, in this island of Atlantis, there was a great and wonderful empire which had rule over the whole island and several others, and even over parts of the Mediterranean as far as Egypt. The city itself was splendid, surrounded by circular harbors, kind of like a bullseye. But this really wasn't enough for the Atlanteans. Remember, they were trying to spread their power through more of the Mediterranean, and Athens was sort of in the way. Now, Athens, according to the story, defeated and triumphed over the invaders, over the Atlanteans, avoiding enslavement. But afterwards, there occurred a violent earthquake and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all of the warlike men in the body, in that whole continent, sank into the earth, and with it, the island known as Atlantis. Now, what happened after that? Well, what was left of the continent became an impassable barrier to sailors. And all of this, again, according to Critias, occurred 9,000 years before Plato's time. Now, what do we make of all that? Well, if we're talking about something near the Pillars of Hercules, which again is a very definable point, it's where the Mediterranean flows out into the Atlantic, again between North Africa and what would be Spain and Portugal. That much is known. But recall that, according to Critias, Atlantis wasn't just an island sort of nestled in there. It was huge. It was larger than Sicily or Crete or Cyprus that are actually in the Mediterranean. Critias claimed that it was bigger than Libya and Asia combined. Now, in ancient terminology, we might have an issue there. Libya, of course, is Saharan Africa by our standards, and Asia could be anything from the Middle East all the way to India. So you're dealing with a huge landmass there, so that's probably not the case. Plato never actually referred to Atlantis with the Greek term for continent. So this is something that either is inferred or that we have to try to figure out what in the world he might have been saying. The ancient Greeks commonly used the terms that he does use for smaller geographical areas. For instance, you could have the region of North Africa function as Libya, just the northern part, and you could refer to Turkey or Asia Minor as Asia, not the whole mass of Asia like we think of today. It's most likely then that Plato's Atlantis was a very large island in the Atlantic, again, if it existed at all. It was fantastically wealthy by Bronze Age standards, and it's very consistent with Bronze Age standards as well. So circa 9400 BC, the Atlanteans fought a war with the Athenians, a war of conquest. And it was destroyed by earthquakes and floods, a judgment of the gods for what they were trying to do in expanding their empire against the poor Athenians. Is there any evidence for this besides Plato's writings? Now the answer is no in terms of the name of the city. In other words, nobody else contemporary with Plato uses the term Atlantis unless they're talking about what Plato had written. One could say that there are no independent sources, therefore, that confirm the reality of Plato's Atlantis. However, there are references, believe it or not, prior to Plato, in Homer and Hesiod and Pindar, other sources like that, that mention, quote, a sacred circular entity somewhere west of Gibraltar. Now, it doesn't use the name Atlantis, but it's describing what Plato said in his dialogues that Atlantis looked like. So what do we make of that? Is that proof? Well, we don't really know. Again, it's part of the mystery. There are other candidates for Atlantis, though. Now, the detail that Atlantis was destroyed with a violent earthquake has drawn the attention of a lot of scholars. There was, in the Mediterranean, a sort of phenomenon, sort of event that kind of, again, I'm really qualifying my terms here because you have to, that sounds like that. There are other options, again, if you want to sort of go beyond the Pillars of Hercules, maybe just thinking that, hey, Plato might have just been talking about some place in the Mediterranean. There are several spots in the Aegean or the Mediterranean that could be candidates, basically because of the eruption of Thera. You have areas near Cyprus. You have Malta, Helike, Tantalus, which is in Asia Minor, Gibraltar itself. You have Andalusia. You have Spartal Bank, submerged off the coast of Morocco. If you go out into the Atlantic, you've got the Azores and Madeira near Portugal. All of these spots are sort of, in some way, attached to the Mediterranean area, again, the Aegean, which is where Plato was from, and also have something to do with the Gibraltar location. So all of these have gotten some play, at least as researchers go, to finding out, well, did Atlantis actually ever exist? Is there evidence for some sort of destruction in or around one of these locations and the remnants, the vestiges of a city, of a civilization? Hence you have the mystery of Atlantis. Now, those are a lot of candidates, but there are a lot of other sort of crazier theories as well. Now, we just mentioned some candidates that are in the Mediterranean or the Gibraltar area. If you really care about Plato's context, those are the options that you should be thinking about. Something in the Aegean, something in the Mediterranean, something around the Straits of Gibraltar, maybe leaking a little bit out into the Atlantic. Those are sort of the serious options. But there are a lot of other weird options. We mentioned earlier in the episode that even the Antarctic is one of those options. Now, the weird stuff derives not from sort of a careful study of Plato or geography or ancient history looking for primary sources that might validate Plato. No, the other stuff comes from psychics, 19th century spiritualism, theories of lost worlds and lost continents, and yes, even aliens. You knew we were going to get there. Come back for part 2, where we overview some of the weird stuff about Atlantis, these alternative theories. Until next time, thanks for watching Fringe Pop 321. Please visit our website for information and resources about this episode and, of course, other episodes, because what you know may not be so.